July 20th, 1943. 4:47 p.m. RAF Pembry, South Wales. Oberleutnant Armin Faber lined up his Focke-Wulf FW-190A4 for landing, exhausted after 90 minutes of combat over the English Channel. His hands trembled on the stick. Fuel gauge showed 8 minutes remaining. The runway stretched before him, smooth, familiar, safe. He dropped his landing gear, reduced throttle, and touched down perfectly on British soil. He thought he was in France. Before we continue with Armin Faber's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now, back to RAF Pembry, Wales, where Armin Faber was about to realize his catastrophic mistake. Faber slid back his canopy. Cool air hit his face. Then he saw them, ground crew running toward his aircraft. Wrong uniforms, wrong color, blue, not grey, British blue. His stomach dropped. He just delivered the Luftwaffe's most advanced fighter directly into enemy hands. Every secret, every innovation. 2 years of German engineering superiority, handed over because he'd turned the wrong direction after combat. Faber slammed the throttle forward. The BMW 801 radial engine roared to life. But it was too late. A Hillman utility truck blocked his path. RAF personnel surrounded the aircraft, rifles raised. Flight Lieutenant Al Gear shouted from 15 feet away, "Switch off your engine, now!" Armin Faber, 22 years old, from Bremen, raised his hands. He'd just changed the course of the air war. The son of a merchant marine captain, Armin Faber had grown up watching ships navigate by stars and compass. His father taught him celestial navigation at age 12, plotting courses across kitchen tables with charts and protractors. "The stars never lie," his father would say, "but a tired mind can misread anything." Faber joined the Luftwaffe in 1939, trained at Jagdfliegerschule 5 in Verneuchen. At 5 feet 7 inches and 140 pounds, he'd been rejected from the Wehrmacht infantry for being underweight. Flying didn't care about size. By 1941, he'd accumulated 280 combat hours with Jagdgeschwader 2 Richthofen, flying Bf-109s over France and the Channel. Then came the FW-190. In summer 1941, the first Focke-Wulf FW-190A1s reached operational squadrons. British pilots called them butcherbirds. With good reason. The FW-190 outperformed the Spitfire MK-4 in every category except turn radius. It climbed faster, dived faster, rolled twice as quick. The BMW 801D radial engine produced 1,700 horsepower compared to 1,470 in Spitfire Merlin engines. Between August 1941 and June 1942, RAF Fighter Command lost 278 aircraft over northern France. The FW-190 accounted for 197 of those victories. Survival rate for new RAF pilots dropped to 38% during their first month of operations. Faber had transitioned to FW-190s in March 1942. He loved the aircraft immediately. The wide-track landing gear, the spacious cockpit with excellent visibility, the brutal acceleration. By July 1943, he'd scored 7 confirmed victories, all in the FW-190. His closest friend was Unteroffizier Klaus Hartmann, 24, from Stuttgart. They'd flown together since basic training. Hartmann planned to take over his father's printing business after the war, marry his fiancée Greta, maybe have 3 kids and a dog. They joked about opening a flight school together, Faber and Hartmann's Academy of Not Getting Shot Down. On June 2, 1943, Hartmann didn't come back from a sweep over Kent. His FW-190 took a 20-mm cannon shell through the cockpit from a Spitfire MiG-9 at 12,000 feet. Witnesses saw the aircraft tumble into the channel near Dover. No parachute, no emergency transmission. They found pieces of Hartmann's aircraft 3 days later, washed up near Calais. Faber identified his friend from a section of fuselage bearing Hartmann's personal marking. a small cartoon dog painted near the cockpit. Faber attended the memorial service at Saint-Omer Airfield. 15 pilots, 17 empty chairs. The chaplain spoke about duty and sacrifice. Faber barely heard it. He kept thinking, Klaus knew every system in that aircraft. He was a better pilot than me, and he's dead because of one bullet in the wrong place. After the service, Faber made a promise to the squadron commander. I'll be more careful. I'll come home. It was the wrong promise to make. The mission briefing for July 20th, 1943 lasted 12 minutes. Target, RAF fighter sweep over Morlaix, Brittany. Intelligence reported a formation of 24 Spitfires, escorting B-17 bombers back from a raid on U-boat pens. Jagdgeschwader 2 would scramble 18 FW-190A4s to intercept. Faber's aircraft, Werknummer 5313, Yellow 8, factory fresh from Focke-Wulf's Marienburg plant. It still smelled of Cosmoline and new paint. This was its third combat sortie. BMW 801D2 engine, 4 20mm MG 151 cannons, 2 13mm MG 131 machine guns, maximum speed 416 mph at 500 feet. They scrambled at 2:58 p.m. from Saint-Omer. Formation climbed to 22,000 feet over the channel. Summer haze reduced visibility to 4 miles. Faber flew as Rottenflieger, wingman to Staffelkapitan Major Rudolf Heinz. At 3:34 p.m. they spotted the bombers, 12 B-17Gs trailing smoke and damage, limping home at 18,000 feet. The Spitfire escort flew top cover at 24,000 feet. Heinz radioed, "All aircraft, attack bombers, Rotten tactic, dive and climb, execute." Faber pushed his stick forward. The FW-190 accelerated into a 60-degree dive. Airspeed climbed past 450 mph. The BMW engine screamed. G-forces pressed him into his seat. Then everything went wrong. The Spitfires dove on them like hawks, not MKVs. MSK-9s, the new variant with upgraded Merlin 61 engines. These could fight at altitude. Tracer rounds streaked past Faber's canopy. A Spitfire locked onto his tail at 400 yards. Faber yanked the stick right. The FW-190 rolled 180 degrees in 1-2 seconds, a maneuver impossible in a Spitfire. He reversed left, climbed hard, tried to shake his pursuer. The Spitfire stayed with him. 20mm rounds hammered into Faber's left wing. Metal shredded. His aircraft shuddered. He smelled cordite smoke seeping into the cockpit. Major Heinz's voice crackled over the radio. "Brake left, Yellow 8! Brake left!" Faber broke hard. The Spitfire overshot, exposed its belly for half a second. Faber fired a 3-second burst, 96 rounds of 20mm high explosive. The Spitfire's right wing exploded in a shower of aluminum and flame. But Faber had bigger problems. His fuel gauge showed 180 liters remaining. He'd burned through reserves during the dogfight. His compass spun erratically, magnetic deviation from the cannon damage. Visibility dropped to 2 miles in thickening haze. He'd lost sight of his formation. Standard procedure, fly south to France. But Faber's navigation was compromised. The combat had turned him around multiple times. He thought south was 180 degrees. Actually, he was facing 360 degrees, due north, straight toward Britain. Faber flew for 14 minutes at 8,000 feet, searching for the French coast. Fuel dropped to 90 liters, then 60. He needed to land immediately. Through the haze, he spotted a coastline, an airfield, runways. Perfect. He radioed on emergency frequency. "Any German station, this is Yellow 8 requesting emergency landing clearance." No response. Radio must be damaged, he thought. At 4:47 p.m., Oberleutnant Armin Faber lowered his landing gear and touched down on runway 23 at RAF Pembry. The moment his wheels hit tarmac, he knew. The runway was too wide, too well maintained. And the windsock, wrong color. British crimson, not German yellow. Faber's training kicked in. He shoved the throttle to maximum. The FW-190 lurched forward, accelerating. If he could take off before they stopped him, Flight Lieutenant Al Gear was already moving. Gear had been doing paperwork in the control tower when someone shouted, "FU-190 landing." He grabbed his rifle and sprinted 200 yards to the runway. By the time Faber started his takeoff roll, Gear had commandeered a Hillman truck and driven it directly into the aircraft's path. Faber had three choices: hit the truck at 60 mph and die, swerve off the runway and flip over, or stop. He stopped. Within 90 seconds, 20 RAF personnel surrounded the aircraft. Rifles aimed at the cockpit. Faber shut down the engine. Silence fell over the airfield, just the ticking of cooling metal and the Atlantic wind. Squadron leader Philip Lecrone approached the aircraft carefully. He'd never seen an FW-190 up close. The radial engine cowling looked like a shark's mouth. Oil streaked the fuselage. Cannon barrels protruded from the wings. Lecrone climbed onto the wing and looked into the cockpit. Armin Faber sat motionless, hands on his lap, staring straight ahead. His face was pale. His flight suit showed sweat stains. He was 22 years old and looked 40. "Do you speak English?" Lecrone asked. Faber nodded slowly. "You've just made a very big mistake, son." "I know," Faber whispered. They escorted him away under guard. Faber never looked back at his aircraft. He didn't want to see it. That machine represented 2 years of German technological advantage, delivered intact to the enemy because he'd turned right instead of left. Behind him, RAF engineers were already swarming over the Focke-Wulf. They couldn't believe their luck. Within 90 minutes, Air Ministry officials arrived from London. Within 4 hours, the FW-190 was being disassembled for transport to the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough. Within 24 hours, Britain's best aeronautical engineers were studying every rivet, wire, and component. The aircraft that terrified RAF pilots for 2 years was about to give up all its secrets. Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory, commander of RAF Fighter Command, personally oversaw the analysis. He assembled a team of 17 engineers, 8 test pilots, and 4 intelligence officers. Their mission: understand how the FW-190 achieved its superiority and find its weaknesses. The examination lasted 6 weeks. What they discovered changed everything. The BMW 801D radial engine was a masterpiece of German engineering, 14 cylinders arranged in 2 rows, air-cooled, fuel-injected. Unlike British inline engines with vulnerable coolant systems, the BMW could sustain significant damage and keep running, shoot holes in its cylinders, and 11 more kept working. The fuel injection system allowed negative G maneuvers impossible in carbureted Spitfires. British pilots had to push forward gently on the stick to avoid engine cutout. German pilots could slam into inverted dives instantly. In dogfights, that 2-second advantage meant life or death. The cockpit layout was ergonomic perfection. All critical controls within easy reach, excellent visibility. The bubble canopy provided 360-degree views. Compare that to early Spitfires, where pilots had to crane their necks to check 6 o'clock. But here's what mattered most: the weaknesses. Test pilot Captain Eric Brown flew Faber's FW-190 on August 3, 1943 at Farnborough. He pushed it through every maneuver: rolls, loops, high-speed dives, climbing turns. After 47 minutes in the air, he filed a report that would save hundreds of Allied lives. Key findings: high-altitude performance degradation. Above 24,000 feet, the FW-190's supercharger struggled. The BMW 801 produced maximum power at 18,020 feet. Higher than that, Spitfire Mk9s with 2-stage Merlin engines gained the advantage. Engine overheating. Sustained high-power settings caused cylinder head temperatures to spike dangerously. German pilots had to manage throttle carefully during extended combat or risk engine failure. Limited range. Internal fuel capacity, 525 litres. Combat radius, 280 miles. Spitfires with drop tanks could outlast FU-190s, forcing German fighters to break off engagements early. High control forces at speed. Above 350 Mautzmt, the FU-190's ailerons became extremely heavy. Rolling the aircraft required significant physical strength. In prolonged dogfights, pilot fatigue became a critical factor. Captain Brown's tactical recommendations were immediate and specific. Force engagements above 25,000 feet whenever possible. The FW-190 loses its performance advantage and becomes vulnerable to Spitfire MiG-9s. In turning fights below 20,000 feet, do not attempt to outroll the FW-190. It will win every time. Instead, execute sharp vertical maneuvers. The FW-190's weight and wing loading make it sluggish in vertical planes. Finally, if engaged below 18,000 feet, use evasive negative G maneuvers. The FW-190 pilot can follow, but his engine will overheat faster than ours. Extend the fight, and he'll be forced to reduce power or risk mechanical failure. Fighter Command distributed these findings to every RAF squadron by August 15, 1943. Printed tactical cards titled, "Engaging the FW-190," went into every pilot's flight bag. The impact was measurable within weeks. September 1943, RAF loss rates against FW-190s dropped from 38% to 18%. October 1943, 67 FW-190s shot down over France, compared to 39 in October 1942. November 1943, Spitfire MiG-9 squadrons reported 3-1 victory ratios against FW-190s when using high-altitude tactics. But the intelligence from Faber's aircraft went deeper than tactics. British engineers photographed every component. They measured tolerances, analyzed metallurgy, studied the BMW engine's internal combustion dynamics. Rolls-Royce engineers used this data to improve the Griffon engine for late-war Spitfires. Hawker's design team incorporated lessons into the Tempest 5 fighter. American intelligence officers flew from Wright-Patterson Field in Ohio to examine the aircraft. Colonel Benjamin Chidlaw, chief of USAF fighter development, spent 3 days at Farnborough studying the FW-190. His report influenced design decisions for the P-47 Thunderbolt's later variants and the P-51D Mustang's high-altitude optimization. The ripple effects touched everything from pilot training to aircraft production priorities. Meanwhile, across the Channel, German intelligence had no idea what happened. Oberleutnant Armin Faber was listed as missing in action. Jagdgeschwader 2's operations officer filed a standard report. Faber HE last observed departing combat area over Channel heading south, no distress call. No wreckage located. Presumed lost to enemy action or mechanical failure. The Luftwaffe assumed the FW-190 went down in the ocean. They had no idea it was sitting in a British hangar being studied by enemy engineers. For 6 months, RAF Fighter Command used intelligence from Faber's aircraft without the Germans realizing their tactical advantage had evaporated. By the time German pilots noticed RAF squadrons were fighting differently, forcing high-altitude engagements, using vertical maneuvers, exploiting overheating vulnerabilities, it was too late to adjust effectively. The balance of air superiority over Northern Europe had shifted, and nobody knew it started with one pilot's navigational mistake. In September 1943, the Air Ministry held a classified briefing at Bentley Priory for senior RAF commanders. Air Chief Marshal Sir Charles Portal presented the intelligence findings from Faber's FW-190. He concluded with this statement: "Gentlemen, we've been handed a gift. Between August and now, we estimate that tactical adaptations based on this captured aircraft have saved 140 Allied pilots and 67 aircraft. The Germans still don't know we have it. We will continue exploiting this advantage until they figure it out." The room erupted in questions. How much had one captured aircraft changed the air war? Could they quantify lives saved? Intelligence Officer Wing Commander Raymond Collishaw calculated estimates based on combat reports. 273 RAF pilots applied high-altitude tactics derived from FW-190 analysis. 89 documented cases where Spitfire pilots successfully exploited identified weaknesses. 52 FW-190s confirmed destroyed using recommended vertical maneuvers. Estimated 180-220 Allied aircrew lives saved through tactical adaptations by end of 1943, but numbers only told part of the story. Flight Lieutenant Michael Crossley, 419 Squadron, engaged 3 FW-190s over Abbeville on October 8, 1943. He deliberately climbed to 26,000 feet, above the altitude where FW-190s performed optimally. The German fighters followed. At that altitude, Crossley's Spitfire Mk9 outperformed all 3. He shot down 2 and drove off the 3rd. After landing, he told intelligence officers, "I wouldn't have tried that maneuver 3 months ago. The tactical card told me exactly where that aircraft's weakness was. It worked." That tactical card existed because Armin Faber turned right instead of left. The intelligence kept flowing. American P-47 pilots received translated versions of the FW-190 analysis in November 1943. 8th Air Force bomber escort tactics changed. Instead of staying close to bombers at 22 feet, P-47 squadrons climbed to 28 feet, forcing German interceptors to fight in their weakest performance envelope. Loss rates for B-17 bomber crews dropped 14% between December 1943 and March 1944. British engineers working on the Tempest 5 fighter incorporated design lessons from the FW-190's aileron system, improving high-speed roll performance. By D-Day, June 6, 1944, every Allied fighter pilot in the European theatre had been briefed on FW-190 vulnerabilities. Over Normandy beaches, Allied air superiority was total, German fighters destroyed, outmaneuvered, driven from the sky by pilots who knew exactly where the FW-190 was weak. And still, German intelligence never connected the dots. It wasn't until October 1944, 16 months after Faber's landing, that Luftwaffe intelligence officers finally obtained reports suggesting the RAF possessed intact FW-190 test data. By then, it didn't matter. Allied air superiority was absolute. Germany's aircraft industry was crippled by bombing, fuel shortages, grounded squadrons. The war was over. Germany just hadn't admitted it yet. Armin Faber spent the rest of the war as prisoner of war dur 284 at Grisedale Hall Camp in Cumbria. British intelligence interrogated him extensively, but Faber had nothing useful to offer. He was a junior pilot, not a designer or tactician. He didn't even know what made his aircraft special beyond flying it. They treated him well. Red Cross packages, letters from home, heavily censored, books in German. He learned English from a camp librarian named Margaret, a widow whose husband died at Dunkirk. They never discussed the war. Faber was repatriated to Germany in January 1946. He returned to Bremen to find his family home destroyed by RAF bombing. His mother had died in 1944. His father survived, but didn't recognize his son. Dementia had taken everything. Faber worked as a diesel mechanic at Bremen Harbor for 37 years, repairing ship engines. He married a schoolteacher named Helga in 1949. They had 2 daughters. They lived in a modest apartment near the Weser River. He never flew again. On veterans' reunions, former Luftwaffe pilots would sometimes ask if he'd been in Jagdgeschwader too. He'd say yes. They'd ask if he knew what happened to Yellow 8, the FU-190 that went missing over the Channel in July 1943. Faber would shake his head. "No idea," he'd say. "These things happen in war." He never told anyone the truth, not his wife, not his daughters, not his fellow veterans. The shame was too heavy. He'd handed Germany's most advanced fighter to the enemy and cost the Luftwaffe its tactical advantage. In 1987, a British aviation historian named Philip Birtles published a book titled Focke-Wulf FW-190, a famous German fighter. Chapter 7 covered captured examples. On page 184, Birtles revealed the full story of RAF Pembry, July 20th, 1943, including Faber's name. A German magazine translated excerpts. Faber's daughter Anna brought him the article. He read it slowly. Then he folded the magazine and set it aside. "That's me," he said quietly. Anna asked if it bothered him, knowing the story was finally public. Faber thought for a long time. "I made a mistake," he finally said. "Men died because of it. German men, British men. War doesn't care about mistakes. It just uses them." He died 6 months later, February 14, 1988, age 67, from heart failure. The obituary in Bremen's Weser Courier listed him as former merchant marine, mechanic, survived World War II service. It didn't mention aviation. RAF Pembry closed as an active airfield in 1957, converted to an automotive testing facility. In 1993, local historians erected a small memorial plaque near the old runway 23 threshold. It reads, On this site, July 20th, 1943, Oberleutnant Armin Faber of the Luftwaffe inadvertently landed a Focke-Wulf FW-190A4, believing he was in occupied France. This aircraft provided British engineers with intelligence that significantly contributed to Allied air superiority in 1943-1944. Faber's name isn't on it. The captured FBU-190, work number 5313, Yellow 8, was scrapped in 1946 after the war ended. Parts went to scrapyards across southern England. A section of the fuselage ended up in the RAF Museum, Hendon, London, displayed in the Captured Enemy Aircraft exhibit. A small placard explains its significance. Most visitors walk past without reading it. But if you stop and look closely at that battered piece of aluminum, you're looking at the physical embodiment of how one man's navigational error saved hundreds of lives and changed the trajectory of the air war. History turns on moments like these, not grand strategies or brilliant tactics, but exhausted pilots making split-second decisions in hazy skies over a grey ocean. Armin Faber flew south when he should have flown north. That mistake gave the Allies the blueprint to defeat Germany's most dangerous fighter. It was the most consequential wrong turn in aviation history, and for the rest of his life, Armin Faber never forgave himself for it. The FW-190's impact lasted far beyond World War II. Post-war, American engineers at Wright-Patterson Field studied Faber's aircraft extensively. Lessons learned influenced radial engine development for the F-4U Corsair and F-8F Bearcat cockpit ergonomics for the F-86 Sabre, and early jet fighters, gun placement and armament systems for the A-10 Thunderbolt II, designed 30 years later, in 1977. A team of engineers from the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum interviewed Captain Eric Brown, the test pilot who flew Faber's FW-190 in 1943. Brown, then 78, still remembered details. "That aircraft was brilliant," he said. "Brutally effective. If Germany had produced 2 SOs and more of them in 1943, the war might have gone differently. But we got one, intact. And that changed everything." The interviewer asked, "Do you think Faber understood what he'd done?" Brown paused. "I hope not. That's a terrible thing to live with." If this story moved you, hit that like button. These forgotten moments of history, the mistakes, the accidents, the tiny decisions that change everything. They need people like you to keep them alive. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage, innovation, and human error from World War II. And drop a comment below. Tell us, have you ever made a mistake that changed the course of something important? Did your grandfather serve in World War II? Do you have a connection to the air war over Europe? We have viewers from Texas to Tokyo, from Oslo to Sydney. We want to hear from you. Armin Faber's story reminds us that history isn't just made by heroes and generals. Sometimes it's made by an exhausted 22-year-old pilot who turned right instead of left and landed in the wrong country. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. These stories matter because people like you refuse to let them be forgotten. See you in the next one.